Hello and welcome back to the LFCS Talks podcast. My name is Troy Beyer, your host, and today I have two very special guests that we're going to be interviewing, Steve Robinson and Debbie Beyer. How are you doing today, Debbie and Steve?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here.
Hey, good morning. You guys wake up early today?
Always.
Cool. Perfect. Debbie, real quick, what is your title here? What do you do at Literacy First?
At Literacy First, I'm the executive director.
All right.
And the founder of Literacy First.
Perfect. Founder, so how long have you been here?
Since the day one.
Which was how many years ago?
About 24 years ago.
Okay, so a minute. Steve, what's your role? How long have you been here?
Chief Business Officer, and
All right.
This is my 21st year.
Perfect. And you've been a lot of things. You've been a history teacher in middle school, or I'm sorry, we don't do middle school. We do 8th grade. History teacher, you've been a principal, you've been a high school teacher, and now you're the CBO.
Yep.
Awesome.
That's right.
And how many years again?
21.
Perfect. 21 years, man. Okay, so let's jump right into our questions. So first question, in broad terms, what even is a charter school?
Well, charter schools, the idea of charter schools started in about 1992. And the idea was to establish something that would allow for choice in public education. Our American education system has kind of been in crisis for a long time. And so this was in the 90s where they realized that, maybe private school was an option, public school was an option, homeschooling had become a thing at that point. But if you weren't able to do anything in private school or homeschooling thing, parents were kind of stuck and there was no option in there. And so the idea was, could we have this concept of choice within the public school system? If a team of people would get together, and come up with an idea, would there be choice for teachers to choose where they wanted to teach, whether they wanted to teach in a regular public school or a school of choice? Would there be a choice for parents to choose where they went to school? Would there be a choice for students? And so it was to give this whole idea of choice based on some specific emphasis that would happen, because a charter school could be established by a group of teachers, could be established by a group of parents, could be established by a group of entrepreneurs with some sort of a bent that might appeal to some schools that were just not a traditional school in general. And so it allowed for a whole lot of creativity, and it allowed for parents that were invested to get involved, or people that were concerned about the way education was going to get involved. So it provided choice across the board for everybody, children, parents, and entrepreneurs.
Awesome. Steve, can you shed a little light on the process? What does it take to get a charter? What did these parents, or Debbie Beyer, what did these people have to do to start a charter? What's the process?
Well, it starts with a ton of research.
Yeah.
Because you've got to create a charter document that outlines your vision, your mission, your values, type of curriculum you're going to use, the type of program you're going to have. I think our charter is 600 pages now.
700 pages.
I think we're at 700 now. Yeah.
And so there's quite a bit to it. So you bring that charter document to a local school district, and they decide whether they're going to grant you that charter or not. If they don't, there is an appeals process that's been changed over the years.
Right.
I believe you can still appeal to the county. I don't think you can appeal to the state anymore.
Got it.
But you've got to get approved by either county office of education or a school district, and they will be your oversight. And your charter is good for, used to be 5 years. You can now get it to 7 if any of these authorizers will give that. And you exist as long as you do the things you say you're going to do.
Perfect.
And you go back every 5 years and
Yeah.
get approved.
And the thing
or
to
not.
note too is every state is different. So
Right.
California has a very different, every charter always has to start with the charter. It has to start with this charter document.
Right.
But the processes and the regulations on how often or how many years a charter is granted really depends on the state. The state of Texas has very different regulations than the state of California. California is kind of one of the most restrictive. Louisiana, the state of Louisiana has a different, in some states you can just get a charter, it's just a charter for life kind of a thing. Or for 11 years or for 7 years, or, so California has just kind of gotten into that, giving you ranked years based on performance kind of a thing.
Right.
In general, the state of California is really difficult on charters as compared to many states.
Got it. Now, so that brings up a question. So our charters, actually, you already kind of answered the question, but from what it sounds like, charter schools are highly regulated, first of all, but then also there's a very specific process as to what it takes to get a charter. This is not just willy-nilly, and someone who knows nothing about education could most likely not even get close to getting a charter approved, getting through all the steps. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, over years, charters have become increasingly more regulated, which then begs the question, what's the difference? You know, in the state of California in particular, I've just asked that question myself. When I started this process 24 years ago, you know, writing a charter, meeting with school districts, and coming up with a dream of what could a school be. You know, could we do a school that really worked with parents, that valued what parents had, that valued what teachers had, that had an idea that we're going to just train this whole child literacy first, you know, not just in reading and writing, but in every part of their education, so that they knew about history, they knew about writing, they knew, you know, the whole child was addressed. So that's what our bent was. You know, there are some charters that are art, and some are music, and some are science, that sort of thing.
Right.
Over time, in the state of California, though, the regulations have become such that being able to distinguish, you know, what do I get to do that's different than what they get to do is very different.
Right.
At the very beginning, it was that not all charter schools had to have all credentialed teachers, because if you're an artist, you're just an artist. You don't necessarily have a credential in art.
Right.
If you're an engineer, you're an engineer. You've got a degree, you've got a career. You don't have a credential in engineering, or physicists the same way. And that has been really difficult in the state of California, because now you have to have a credential no matter what.
Right.
And, you know, artists that are artists aren't going back and getting an art teacher, you know, art credential.
Right.
Engineers are not going to go get an engineering degree, an engineering credential.
An entrepreneur that started a very successful business that wants to maybe teach kids how to do that
Right,
isn't
right.
going to go back and get a teaching credentials to teach kids.
Right.
However, they could go teach in a college, right? Do
Right.
colleges have credentials?
No, not at all.
Are college professors credentialed? Are
They-
they molding minds of children all over the world and the nation?
Yeah.
Oh, that's weird.
So these are the things that have made it more difficult for charters to be unique, because they put us in the box of every teacher has to have a credential, or you have to have some weird workaround to get to it.
Right.
So the credential piece has made it really difficult.
Right. And so I have a couple questions that I know come at the charter community. So there's this push and pull, and I can see there are some benefits to having credentialed teachers, because at least like Literacy First, we can say all of our teachers are credentialed. We know that they have a baseline education in what it takes to teach. And also, one of my biggest axes to grind with college professors is that they don't know how to teach. A lot of times, they just know their content, and then they have no idea how to communicate that content. And so you get college professors that are just terrible. And I don't care if people are offended. There are many of them that are terrible. But at least with teaching, there's like this minimum, you know, kind of line of like how to teach. Also, with the restrictiveness of charter schools, is there a benefit to the regulations on charters? Because in California specifically, and I think, you know, close to our school, there was a very, very corrupt situation that happened with one of those distance learning programs, and it would seem that they were under-regulated. So what are your thoughts on the need for regulation in charter schools? Is it needed, or should it just be the Wild West?
I mean, there's bad actors in everything. I mean, there's bad actors in business. There's bad actors in every part of life. There's bad actors.
Politics, maybe?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you know, you're bound to find people that find the loopholes and find a way to make money that shouldn't be making money, or find some kind of way to make it go that it shouldn't have been going. That doesn't mean you need to smash the whole butt. You know, you just kill the whole thing, and that's kind of part of what's happened in the state of California, is that the regulations have kind of killed the creativity juice to be able to do things that are interesting. I mean, for Literacy First, us having credentialed teachers is not necessarily a thing, because we're talking about literacy, the basic elements of education.
Right.
But for schools that are trying to do art schools or dance schools or engineering things, that's killed that creative piece, because they're having a hard time finding people that will be able to meet that need
Right.
to fulfill what their charter dream was. So, I mean, yeah, there's bad actors. There have been some bad actors, and of course, it's in the paper everywhere.
Right.
But the same stories aren't about the bad actors in public schools.
Right.
It doesn't seem near as much. So there's always, a big bunch of noise about the new guy coming in town making, doing something different, because the other side of it is oftentimes the data that we have reports that not oftentimes, a report just came out by Stanford saying that charters are doing an amazing job in comparison to the regular public schools. That's, not hitting the paper more than once, because that's not necessarily information that everybody wants to know about.
And that report was presented by by Thurman, right? Who
By the
what's
state
Thurman?
superintendent.
Yeah, the state superintendent, California state superintendent, held a meeting. He presented Stanford's report, or his team did, and their report said that they presented from the state that charter schools are outperforming other public schools. Is that right, Steve? I knew you were in that meeting, right? You watched it?
Attended it, yeah.
Yeah.
It was very positive about charters, which was really surprising.
Yeah.
I thought it would be different.
We kept thinking, what? Are we hearing right?
Yeah.
Are we hearing what they're saying right here? Because that's not news you expect.
When they're saying it, the data speaks extremely loud, and they can't get around it. Either they don't report the report, or they report it as it is. So, anyway, charters are doing a good job. Anything else to add, Steve?
Yeah, the trade-off with the regulations, I don't think anyone, philosophically is opposed to some regulations on education. Everyone wants to make sure that, students are in a safe place, that they're being taught by safe people, quality people who know how to teach, and the students are learning. The trade-off with the charters having more regulation was we were given some more freedoms.
Right.
And, the regulations keep increasing and the freedoms get less and less. And, with a charter in California being 5 years, you've got to justify your existence every 5 years. And if we're not doing what we say we're going to do, and our students aren't learning, and there's not money in the bank and a wait list, we don't get to exist. Where, the traditional district schools, those that do fail kids year after year after year after year, zero consequences.
Right.
And that is kind of the hypocrisy of it. And because that also is tied to a budget and an economy. They keep doing a poor job, and we keep giving more money to failing systems.
Right.
And then we're held to this high level of accountability that if you don't perform and do what you say you're going to do, then in 5 years, you're liable not to be able to exist anymore. It's just, it's a system that makes no sense when you look at it.
Totally.
And, one of the other ideas behind the charter movement was that if you give charters some freedom to do some things differently, and a chance to find other ways that work, then hopefully those would filter back to the typical district schools, and they might start doing some of those things.
Right.
And, that report that came out, certainly seemed to show, hey, charters have got some good ideas. But there seems to be so much political animosity between the powers behind the traditional district schools and the charters that there's this wall between them where the ideas don't seem to be penetrating from the charters into the district schools, which is disheartening.
Right. Absolutely.
Because you have these giant labs that are actually living, working with kids, seeing results.
Right.
A lot of it, too, is a small school model. You look at most charters, and they are small schools. They're not, campuses of 3,000, 1,800 elementary kids. They're small campuses. And there's a lot to be said for just the number of bodies on a piece of property, how much accountability, or how a student can be known.
Yep.
If you are an invisible person, then who cares what you do? But if you're just in a place where people are going to know you, and they know your name, and your parents are there, and you've been there from kindergarten through high school or 8th grade, there's a whole lot of sense of family and connectedness that alone makes a huge difference in the way a kid behaves or the way that they perform.
Absolutely. So real quick, when and how did charter schools start? So it was 1992
when in legislation, the first charter
1992,
school. 1992,
right? Okay.
In Minnesota was the first charter school in Minnesota, which has been Minnesota for some reason has been on the cutting edge of school choice. They actually offered vouchers for years. They still do. but they've been on the cutting edge of that choice thing.
So what was the legislation? Was it passed federal? Was it a federal legislation that passed that allowed charter schools?
Yeah, it was under George Bush
Okay.
Jr., and it was called the Charter Schools Act, and it enabled this idea of choice.
Got it. Okay. So why were charter schools necessary? I think we covered that question already. Are they still necessary?
Yeah, I would agree they're still necessary. Are they being able to do what they were originally commissioned to do? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because instantly they're forced into this box. Well, in the state of California, I'm just speaking for this state. Now, in other states, I'm not sure how that's working.
Right.
But I know in the state of California, I mean, we've got the most charters in the nation probably. I think I can't remember.
I think it's
the numbers.
11% of
Yeah.
every student in California attends a charter.
Yeah, yeah.
I think
so.
it's
It's a kind of a normal thing. There's over 1,000 charters in the state, and we've got a huge charter school advocacy group. Whether any of that makes any difference, because it all comes down to the state legislature and the politics of that, and who's the governor. Our governor currently is not a pro-charter person. The teachers union is a very anti-charter, and they pay the bills that fund most of these campaigns. And so when legislation comes through, they don't generally make it out of the ed committee.
Interesting. Okay. Okay, Steve, this is a good question for you. In what ways are charter schools and private businesses similar?
So, like we were saying before, if a charter does not perform, meaning if our students are not learning and we're not doing the things that we say we're going to do in our charter, we don't get to exist.
Right.
And so, like in any small business, if your product is not selling, if your service is not selling, you're going to go under.
Right. Yep.
And so charters are very similar in that way. We don't get to exist decade after decade after decade producing a failed product, meaning students not learning the way that they should. We don't get to exist like that way. And that, again, it's a big difference between charters and a typical district public school. A school can fail decade after decade and continue to exist, and charters cannot.
Right.
We've got to balance budgets. We cannot spend more than we take in, and very similar to a small business.
Yeah.
And is that true for regular public schools?
Typically not. They are able to borrow from the county treasury where charters are not.
Okay.
And if you look in the education budget trailer bills every year, there are sections where the state will bail out districts like Oakland and LA Unified that continue to overspend beyond their budget, and the state will backfill it, where they will not do that for charters.
Okay, so what you're saying is charter school, like a small business, if you overspend, you go out of business. But a public school, unlike a small business, if you overspend, there are caveats written into law that allow them to borrow and not repay from a county treasury. Is that accurate?
I'm not sure they don't have to pay back the county treasury.
I mean, it can be over 1,000 years. I don't know.
As far as the items in the budget trailer bills, I've never read anything in there that says they would have to pay that back.
Got it. That's crazy. How's running a charter school similar to being an entrepreneur? So why does it take an entrepreneurial spirit to run a charter school? I mean, I think it's easy to connect the dots between an entrepreneur and starting a charter school. And so in what ways are charter schools very entrepreneurial in spirit? Debbie?
I think that's part of the fun of it, really, is that you can think outside of the box. I mean, we can do some things that, like, why not? Why can't we do that thing? We can have events and do special things that bring the parents in or cause the parents to want to be involved. You can come up with ideas that are not just your typical traditional ideas or grade level. Like our second graders, they do a thing called second grade stores, and it's helping our second graders come up with this business idea and find an idea that they can sell and pitch, and then they do this whole thing where all the kids put out their booths and all the kids come around and buy things from them. I mean, it allows us to kind of think outside the box and find things that not only help kids learn and make education practical, but it also makes it fun. And at the same time, knowing, like Steve was just saying about the money piece, we find ways to raise money for extra things that we want to do. We have a foundation that raises funds for us that supports what we do. That involves our parents. It allows us to be able to get a lot of people involved in the mission, and not just the mission, but the well-being of an organization that's served their family over years. So there's kind of there's a little bit of an emotional attachment to being a part of Literacy First, because families have been here for decades. I was talking to a mom at the high school, and she said, this is going to be our 24th year, because they've had kids at our school ever since we started, because they had kids spread out over time, and so their last one is a senior this year.
Wow.
And I said, I think we need to come up with a pen that says legacy parent at this point, because we've got parents that have been around as long as we've been around.
Or parents that are graduated students that now have students that go to our school.
For sure.
Or teachers that graduated from our school and are now teachers at our school.
Exactly.
We employ almost 10, maybe closer to 15 now. This year we hired 3 or 4.
So. And I don't know that, public schools couldn't say, well, I went to school at this district and now I'm working for this district.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's unique. But when you feel like you've kind of homegrown this thing and seen it from the beginning, and seen the babies come through, and then seeing the next baby come through, and the next baby come through, I mean, it kind of builds a sense of community and family that is really sweet.
Right. So this brings up one question for you real quick, because so you said in California, charter schools are so hemmed in or regulated that they don't have the freedom to really affect change. My response to that, or I could see questions coming like, well, wait, what about Literacy First? Are we still able to be a charter? Is it still worth coming to Literacy First?
Well, yeah. I mean, we're still doing the things that Literacy First does. Okay. It's the backside, the things that Steve has to deal with that we do. That we deal on the backside as far as accountability and oversight and that sort of thing.
Right.
That take the fun away.
Got it.
That take that sort of thing.
At Literacy First core, we are still the school that you started 24 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anything to add to that, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, and we were talking about the legacy people, the former students that now are teachers or are now parents with their own children here, and and Debbie was saying, maybe that's not as special at a large district. Well, it's because they're not really known at the larger district. Like, a student who comes up from kindergarten through graduation, they're known.
Yeah.
And so when they come back as a parent, like, we remember who they are and their name. And
100%.
Like, they're part of the Literacy First family. You're not really part of a family at a big district system or big district school. And that piece of everyone being known is unique to us.
Right.
And it's one of our founding principles and one of the best things that we do.
Awesome. And the creativity has not left this school.
No.
And absolutely not. I can say that emphatically. I mean, we're constantly rethinking something.
Right.
And I know this year many of our grade level teams are rethinking the events they're doing. I mean
we
creativity
started that,
exists. Yeah.
And this summer we've been intentional about looking at reimagining, the things that we've done. Are they still relevant? Do we need to rethink about it in a different way? Do we need to look at it differently? So we've this year we did that, reimagined the way we do recess, because kids are just, running around playing games and it's a break for them, but can we be more intentional that would be more enjoyable for everybody to be there if we had special things happening? And so we kind of changed the way we do recess. Over the summer, we had a summer team that looked at, because American history is a big part of our charter.
Oh, yeah.
Are we being intentional in the way we're teaching that? We talk about it, but are we intentional? And so we kind of reformatted the way we're looking at American history. And so tomorrow's 9/11, and so we're looking at how are we doing that across kindergarten through 12th grade? What are we doing differently? And every year we've always done things. I mean, 9/11 happened 2 weeks after we started, so it was a big deal that first, everybody remembers where they were, but for Literacy First, we were on the Chaldean, St. Michael's Chaldean Catholic Church when 9/11 happened. Yeah. That was a big deal because of the whole population thing and
Yeah.
the nature of the church and the concern of the church to the school relationship. And so it was a big thing then. And so looking at what is it that we're doing to teach American history in a way that connects to little kindergartners and makes a difference to seniors in high school.
Mm-hmm. So like kids actually know things like the preamble or the Constitution
Right.
or the Declaration of Independence
Exactly.
or
The
why the
founding
Declaration of
fathers.
Independence existed.
Yeah, exactly. What's
Cool.
the story behind the Star Spangled Banner? You know,
Uh-huh.
all of those sorts of things.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've seen some of that stuff coming through. It's a blast.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, another piece to the creativity part and running a charter like a small business and the entrepreneurship of it is, unlike, and the difference between a charter and a district school is we're not guaranteed students.
Right.
Like we've got to advertise and attract customers, so to speak.
Right.
And if we're not being creative and if we're not creating valuable programs that work and are effective, people will not enroll.
Yeah.
And you're getting into the funding piece. We're funded by students in seats,
Right.
by attendance.
Right.
And if we don't have students, we don't have funding.
100%.
And we're
And
not.
that is similar to public schools. We're funded by students in the seats, the same as they are.
Yeah. But we're not guaranteed students, just by where they live.
And so one of the best marketing techniques that I've seen work for Literacy First is having a quality product. And I feel like that's the best marketing that any business can have is having a quality product. And I think that is at its foundation what has kept and allowed Literacy First to exist and thrive through so many different eras. I mean, we went through, 9/11 at the very beginning. We went through the 2008 crash and deferrals and not, the state not paying schools money and the Literacy First having to make sure that we had a budget that was balanced enough to make payroll. And LFCS has never missed a payroll, by the way, which I think that some other districts may have done that through that 2008 time period. And so many other things, so on and so on. I mean, the pandemic that's happened in the last couple of years, so many different events we've survived and thrived and grown through. I mean, our homeschool program blew up in the last 5 years. I mean, it's max capacity at this point, right?
Right.
So,
I think our parent, we don't really have to spend a whole lot of money on advertising because our parents are our biggest advertisers. I mean,
Right.
they're the ones going out. That's why we have a wait list of 800 kids. I mean, we have way more kids that want, way more kids that want in than desks we have for kids to sit at. So and that's a good thing and it's a bad thing because that it's word of mouth where parents are like, I've been happy here and you would be happy here too. And our parents and our students are our best advertisements.
totally. So you mentioned financing and students in seats. So how do we get funded? How does Literacy First get money to be able to pay for facilities, to pay for curriculum, teachers? How does that break down, Steve?
So the vast majority of our funding comes from the state, and it is based on attendance.
Okay.
And so we have attendance reports we give to the state a couple of times a year, and that forms the bulk of our funding. We do get some federal money and some other special ed money from the state, based on our demographics.
Okay.
But that's the majority of our funding. The major difference between the funding for charters and traditional district schools when it comes to facilities. They either inherit facilities, or when schools want to when districts want to build new schools or upgrade schools,
Right.
they are able to put bonds on the ballot. And the people within that district can vote on whether to increase their own property taxes to pay for the upgrades or the new construction for schools. Charters do not have that authority, so we cannot put public bonds on the ballot. So that means we have to pay for our own facilities.
Got it.
So we pay mortgages, we pay rent, and traditional district schools do not do that. So that is a multi-million-dollar burden on the budgets of charters. that is not on the budgets of the district schools.
So if we're looking apples to apples, public school gets X funding. Let's say a charter school and a public school have the exact same attendance. Public school gets this much. Regular public charter school gets this much. Same exact funding. There's not bonus funding for facilities for charters.
Correct.
And then the charter schools have to spend money on facilities.
Correct. There is a state program. It's kind of by its nickname of the law, SB 740.
Okay.
And that does help with some of the facility costs.
Okay.
If you rent from a school district, you
Right.
do not get any reimbursement for that.
Okay.
And so for us, we have two properties that are three. No, sorry, we have one that is a district property that
Got it.
We don't get any reimbursement for. And the program does not reimburse 100%.
Got it. What percentage?
It's about
Yeah.
70,
Okay.
about 70%.
So it helps. But
So we
it's-
do get some help.
But we're only getting that on one property, correct? Or no?
We get that on three.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as long as it's not a district owned property.
Got it.
Yeah.
Now, do they reimburse mortgage or just rent?
So they reimburse. They do reimburse both, depending on how
Expenses.
it's structured.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So there is some help, but still, at
It's
the
not
whole-
on par.
Yeah. So let's say because we have 4 properties, 3, we're reimbursing about 50%. Is that an accurate total of the total?
Probably
pot?
pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And we're broad terms. Don't quote me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. Facilities
big
are
deal.
not cheap. Now, what about facility upkeep? Is that something because I know we have to fund all of our facility upkeeps and our maintenance crew, and I mean that all comes out. Is that the same as public school? Do public schools have to pay that?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So it's on the schools to upkeep that. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That lack of funding then does impact other areas because of that. We're
Yeah.
paying for facilities. There's less money to pay teachers. And so that's always a challenge because if we're paying on this area and we've got to balance the budget out, then the money that's left to pay the most important people that we have, which is our teachers
Right.
and staff, there's less money in that pot. And so that causes a disequity when it comes to teacher salaries because we are not a union shop. And that again was another intention of charter schools, of our charter school in particular, is to be free, to be able to have people walk through the door and have a grievance. They know where we are to come tell that,
Right.
and adult people can figure that out. But the bottom line comes down, if you just have $10, you just have $10,
Right.
and you can't spend $11. And so that is a challenge when you have qualified teachers that have, if they go someplace else, could make significantly more because just the nature of the regular public school versus the charter school.
Yeah. Because they can overspend and get bailed out, and
Uh-huh.
they don't have to pay for their facilities.
Exactly.
So those two
Yeah,
things,
yeah. So
which
that-
we have actively seen in San Diego County big time, because schools were given a lot of one-time COVID funds, and other schools have used those funds to hire staff, but then now they're just getting bailed out because that money doesn't exist anymore, but they're continuing with those staff and those pay raises and all that kind of stuff. We couldn't do that because
Right.
it's irresponsible to take money that you're handed for a one-time thing. If I sell a car and then take that money and use it to pay my mortgage, well, once that money's gone, how am I going to pay my mortgage? And that's kind of what a lot of these schools have done. We can't do that as a charter school. That's an unwise choice, but anyway.
So that goes to that piece of a choice for staff. I mean,
Right.
We have teachers that choose to come here and stay
Yep.
here, knowing that the academic freedom that they're getting, the ability to be able to work as a team, the ability to be able to develop projects, and see kids learn and grow and stay in a stable place, that outweighs the additional money.
Right.
It not for everybody, but that is a choice that teachers that stay at Literacy First choose.
I mean, it's kind of it's a badge of honor that our staff hold tight. We're here because we choose to be here,
Yeah,
just like our
right.
families.
Right.
And they choose to be here because they know the impact of this place. They know
Yeah.
the family of this place. They have chosen to take a different route, and it's more than just money.
Yeah.
And I think that, if we're talking holistically, we can, the human,
I mean, sometimes I don't know that our parents appreciate that
and that's why I'm saying it.
because we have teachers that have chosen
Uh-huh.
to make significantly less money stay here to teach their children.
Yeah.
And we have great parents. I mean, they do amazing things in the classroom and Teacher Appreciation Day and things like that. I mean, it's just like crazy time.
Right.
But sometimes I think they forget that.
Absolutely.
That our teachers work at the pleasure of the taxpayer, but they work because they choose to be here.
Yeah, they're here because they've chosen to
Yeah.
be here. This
Yeah.
place is different.
Right.
And that's why kids are here. It's why staff are here.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a bad, like I've talked to staff and they own that with a badge of honor that they work at Literacy First.
Yeah.
And then people gain fulfillment by doing the thing that they know they were made to do, not so much by running to chase money. And that's, we can see that back through history of, I think the stories of people who've made all the money in the world and said money's worth nothing are endless. And so seeing the fulfillment of a lot of the staff and teachers that we have here is really neat because they know they're where they're supposed to be. So.
Yeah.
Last question. Do politics impact charters at all? I don't think so, right? Not at all?
Not at all.
Very
Not a
sarcastic.
thing, not
So
a
how do
thing.
politics impact charter schools? Steve, go. You got the best smirk.
Politics matters. It matters who's in the state legislature. It matters who's in the governorship. Talking back to 92, it mattered who was in the presidency.
Yeah.
Different president, that federal law that would have allowed charters wouldn't have happened. And, who was in Congress. We have one party rule in California at the moment and for the foreseeable future. And like Debbie was saying, that the powers that be that fund the Democratic Party in California, for the most part, are anti-charter.
Yeah.
And so we do have advocacy groups, 2 major ones in California that fight for the survival of charters, and their work is important because we fight for our life every day in Sacramento. I am convinced there are significant powers that would like us to be gone. And the good work that we do helps us keep going. Gives us a leg to stand on in front of the legislature, and it matters. And the legislature doesn't always do things to hurt charters, but sometimes they do. And we see bills every year. That here's another charter killer bill. That we have to defeat, and we've got to get out. We've got to let our assembly members and state senators know, the governor know what our opinions are. We need to get our families vocal and involved. So we've got to be protected.
It's not just, I mean, the state level is huge because that's where all this legislation that comes in that just squashes us. But the other part of that is that the local politics are as important as well. Because if we're looking for a facility, we're going to go to the city of El Cajon or the county of San Diego and have to, get all the permissions for CUPs and MOUs and all the, permissions to build and cut and dig dirt and all that kind of stuff,
Okay, stop. What's a CUP? What does that mean?
Conditional use permit.
What is an MOU?
Memorandum of Understanding.
What are those?
Those are all things that say that we can do what we need to do.
Okay.
And you have to get those from the city of El Cajon, the county of San Diego, the SDG&E. I mean, there's all the things in order to, in our case, build or move portables on, all those sorts of things, and that all comes down to relationship. I mean, at this point, Literacy First has a pretty good relationship with the city of El Cajon. We've been here. We keep our facilities in immaculate, order. We're good they're happy to have us on the south, on East Main that's West Main. They're proud to have us on the West Main. I mean, every place we are, we've improved the look of the neighborhood, and so they're happy about that. The other piece of that is, while we work with the San Diego County Office of Education, and they're our oversight, they're the people that enact all of the state, regulations and everything. Our direct oversight is the San Diego County Board of Education.
Right.
The San Diego Board of Education is the one that has the authority to give us 5 years or no years.
Right.
And they are the same group of people that are controlled by the state politics, the same party. There is no diversity in that body. And so their inclination to be positive toward charters when they come up to them for approval or even be fair and just is almost impossible.
It's rare, yeah.
It's
I mean-
become a big discussion among charters in general because
Yeah.
while we may have a supportive county office of education, the board is not necessarily the same body.
Yeah.
And they're the ones who have to go to be renewed.
Right. So there's a little nuance to the statement though. Like, so to say the board can choose 0 years or 5 years or 7 years, that is kind of accurate, but kind of not, because isn't it accurate to say that now there's legislation and laws based off of if a school meets certain criterion based on test scores and some other things that they actually can't just get arbitrarily shut. Is that accurate?
That is the intent. It didn't seem to be the case when we went up the last time because the board was uneducated. So now there's a big push to educate the board on what they legally can do.
Right.
Because at our hearing, when we went up a couple of years ago, I mean, it was questionable at one point whether we were going to get any years by the way they were behaving. And
Right.
And I mean, there was a whole lot of backdoor happening actually in the meeting, it seemed, that made them realize you can't do what you're trying to do here. But it was politics at that point, very strong politics in the
Yeah.
room that night. It's difficult to have a discussion or a conversation about it knowing, the composite of the board because
Yeah.
the politics of that board are very real. And it's now a big discussion among all the charters that are coming up for renewal in this next renewal cycle.
Yeah.
Because politics play very heavily in that.
Right. So parents who are listening, and I mean, a lot of this sounds very concerning. And so we have to be pretty careful because we're, kind of on a podcast being pushed out by a charter school, but what would a parent do to figure this stuff out? I mean, a lot of this stuff I think is probably very new information about how charters are approved and not, and all the kind of stuff. I would say parents need desperately to be educated on what the politics are and whether or not they agree or disagree with them. Also need to be very educated, do your own research, DOR, right, on what the things that you value in your community are and whether your politics actually match those. Because it would seem that I hear often, one person talking about politics here, but not realizing that the things that they consume on a daily basis, whether that's charter schools or whatever, even match these politics. And if you're over here with pushing these politics where you're actually going to kill the thing that you love so much. So what is your advice for parents listening to this, wanting to be part of the process and helping make sure charter schools exist and continue to exist if they so want to?
Like I said before, about every state is different, with regard to their attitude toward charters and the politics in the state.
Yep.
It's also like that in every county or
Right.
every county, board of education. Politics are different in every county in the state of California, depending on the local politics. So for a parent who's made the choice to put their child in a charter school, I think first off they need to understand what's going on locally. How successful is this school being, and then who is the authorizing agency, and then when do they come up for renewal? And if your charter school says we need you to show up at this meeting or write letters, or that sort of thing, you can't just put your student in a charter school and walk away.
Yeah.
And the idea is, though, that if you've chosen to put your student in a charter school, that meant you were a consumer of education and you were paying attention because you chose to put your student there for a reason. And when you get your kid there, you can't just turn around and walk away. You have to pay attention to what's going on continually, because at some point that charter school is going to have to go back up before that Board of Education
Yep.
and renew their charter. And you need to know what, and that charter will probably make you aware. We're having a hearing. We
Yep.
need you to be there. We need you to write a letter. We need you to, bring bells or whistles or posters or whatever
Right.
it is. Over the years, we've done all those things.
Yep.
Because and over the years, we've had different boards, and boards that were pro-charter, and right now, boards not so pro-charter. So it doesn't mean it stays the same way. Over 24 years, we've had all of it.
Yeah.
So the board dynamics change. But parents who put their kids in charter schools, I think, need to realize they have joined a part of a political movement. I mean, it is a movement across America for
Yeah.
choice in education. And like any other thing that's new and different than the norm, you have to be continually, well, it's like freedom, liberty. You have to be continually vigilant. I mean, we're only
Yeah.
one generation away from, abject, suppression.
Who said that? That was a quote by Steve. Was it Franklin?
I was going to say, I
One
think
generation
it was
away?
one generation ahead.
Was it
Benjamin-
Jefferson?
Sure.
I think it was Jefferson.
Yeah.
Maybe.
One of
I'm
those
probably
founders,
wrong, yeah.
one of those important guys. But that's the truth. Might have been Ronald Reagan. I don't know.
Yeah, but actually, I probably think it was Reagan. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it was Reagan.
Yeah.
But that's the truth of it, is that you can't just assume freedom. Freedom is a precious thing that has to be guarded and taken care of and watered and paid attention to, because it slips away one little thing at a time.
Yeah. Do charter schools exist long term if the charter school employees are the only ones fighting for charter schools without the parents who are choosing?
I don't think so.
No.
So if you're a parent listening, you're the key.
Yep.
Read the newsletter,
Yeah.
Yep.
because we will put out if we need you. Or
Yeah.
to pay attention to a certain law or come to a certain meeting. So
Write your congressman, write
Yep.
your state assembly, write a letter to the governor. It matters, and it makes a difference.
Awesome. Steve, anything else to say in closing? Anything else you want to share with our families that are listening?
no, love this place. Love this place.
Lucy First is a pretty special place, and we serve. We serve here because we choose to, and our families come here because they choose to, and that's a great marriage.
I think it's awesome that most of the staff that I talk to, you choose to use the word serve when they talk about being here. And I'm not sure if that word serve, because it implies a lot, is used regularly in education.
Should be.
It should be. And on that note, thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
Awesome podcast. LFCS out.